The Rich and Mike Show, Flagler County's hometown sports show. Here are your hosts, Rich Carroll and Mike Licio.
Yes, it's another episode of the Rich and Mike Sports Show. Good Saturday morning, Flagler County. And a good Saturday morning to you, Mike Licio.
Hello, Flagler County. Rich, I'm in a much cooler, temperature-wise, place than I was this time last Saturday.
Oh, yeah, you were out under the sun, Indian trails, sport, the whole thing. You had I was going to say lacrosse. It was lacrosse, right?
It was lacrosse.
A lacrosse tournament. Yeah, I'm right on it. Okay, I was mixed up between lacrosse and field hockey and kind of similar, no? Or is it different? Tell me how different it is.
There are some similarities. I'm not going to give a breakdown between the two.
Okay.
But yeah, there was a lacrosse. The Florida Lacrosse hosted the 22nd annual Father's Day Invitational, and there was 150 teams at 3 sites: Matanzas High School, Wadsworth. I was at I was at Indian Trails because that was where my son was playing on his lacrosse team, Bonito Run. You might have heard their coach on the morning sports yesterday, and they played 4 games, and it was a great event. According to Brittany Kershaw of the city of Palm Coast, 7,500 spectators attended the event, and there was 150 teams and divisions all the way from 8U, and you saw all these different kids from different places in the state, different colored jerseys, and boys and girls from all the way from 8U up to high school. You had some high school varsity players there, and it was a lot of great lacrosse, and it was a fun event. The weather, we were lucky. It was hot, but we got out before the rain. There was some rain in the afternoon, but they were able to get all the games in. That was pretty good. Great job by the event organizers to still get all those games in despite about a 2.5-hour rain delay. And then so they played pool play on Saturday, and then they had a championship tournament for each division. And I think there was like 14 divisions, I believe is the number. 14 different divisions, each had a championship. And so it was a great event. It was a great time. Michael's team didn't do so well, but still a great time to expose people to Palm Coast and what a great community this is. And it ended up being a successful event once again.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like a bad place to hold an event like that over at Indian Trails. I know a year or two ago you ever heard of Quidditch? I think that's what it's called.
Yes.
That's the Harry Potter
Is that a real
game.
thing?
No, it's not. Well, I guess they made it a real thing. So it's the Harry Potter game. They get on the brooms and they're chasing this gold ball around, whatever the rules are. Well, somehow they made that a real game, right? And they held a tournament at Indian Trails, and teams from, and not just Florida, from other states too, came down, and it was a big deal. I actually went out there and took some pictures and did some interviews, and it seemed like everybody had a great time, and it was a nice location, nice venue for that type of an event. For an actual sport, no offense to any of you Quidditch enthusiasts, but for lacrosse, I'm sure it was even better. I'll never forget. The first job I had in radio. I worked at WDHA, the Rock of New Jersey, and my first boss was a pretty famous guy, Curtis Kay, partially famous because he was hired by Howard Stern back in the day to work at WRNW in Westchester. That's how he got his start with Howard, and I ended up working for him at WDHA, and I remember talking to Curtis Kay. He passed away also back in 2020. Curtis Kay, but he was one of my first mentors in radio, and I remember talking to him and about sports and telling him I love baseball, and Curtis Kay just looked at me with this angry look, and he said, "You should like a real sport like lacrosse." And that's all he had to say about that. I was like, okay, a little intimidated because I knew who he was, so I wouldn't speak to him for very long, but as I came away from the conveson, he doesn't like baseball. To him, a real sport is lacrosse. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh, up in the Northeast, my cousin played lacrosse out on Long Island. I remember actually one of my counselors at summer camp way out in Wading River, Long Island, back in the 90s. He played lacrosse at Adelphi, which is still a lacrosse powerhouse. But New York, Connecticut, New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, those are lacrosse hotbeds, but it's spreading like wildfire here. I can remember about 15 years ago, there was about 8 to 10 lacrosse programs between Jacksonville and Daytona Beach, and now most schools have them. We have them we have them in Flagler County, and all the St. Johns County schools have them, and some of the Volusia schools are starting again, and most of the Jacksonville schools. So it's a sport that's growing, and once you start to understand it, and I didn't understand it for about the first 3 months my son played. He played fall ball last year, and I didn't understand it. I just, okay, you throw the ball to your teammate. If you have the ball on your stick, you run like heck towards the goal. If you don't, you beat the poop out of the person who does. And that was my understanding of lacrosse. And then I got called in the service to do a Flagler lacrosse game and do PA for a Flagler lacrosse game, and having to sit there and talk to the officials and have people talking and the stat keepers talking. All of a sudden I started to kind of understand it. I'd say I understand it enough to watch it and know what my son's doing now, but it's actually a very intense game, and professional lacrosse is starting to take off. So it's a growing sport, and I think when it being in the Olympics next year, I think it's going to take off even further. But to put a bow on it, the city of Palm Coast did a great job. If you've ever been to Indian Trails, parking sometimes can be a little bit of a bear, but they had that well organized. They had the middle school parking lot open. They had people directing people to park. So it was really a great experience on that side of it too. So my hat's off to the city for their part in helping with a great event.
All right, so you had a great experience out there with the lacrosse, Indian Trails, Palm Coast. What else you got going on?
Well, it's kind of quiet. I know Nia Williams from FPC. She's a junior now. I was going to say sophomore, but school's over. She's a junior now. She is competing in the national championships, probably as we speak right now, today, this weekend. And so hope to have some results from that. Carson Barrett, who is a wrestler at FPC, he was one of 20 wrestlers who made all area, by the way, and he had 51 wins, led the area in wins this year. He committed to Davis and Elkins College in West Virginia. So he is off to wrestle at the college level. My series on the all area teams will continue on the morning sports. There's been a lot of them. I know they announced I know they announced those teams about 4 weeks ago, but we've had so many, you couldn't possibly fit it in the 1-2 minute report. So we'll continue to do those. 7-on-7 soccer is beginning for the area soccer teams. So a lot of those teams will be made up of kids from FPC and Matanzas, and some of them will be playing for their coaches. Some of them will be playing for other teams, but they are getting ready for the upcoming winter season in soccer. So there's a lot of that summer league basketball going on. So some of our kids are competing. I know I was watching Anthony Hampton make it rain along with Nate Royal on some Instagram clips the other day. So that's in full swing as well. But overall, as far as games being played, it's kind of quiet. I guess the biggest local story is the Florida Panthers.
That's right.
When you think of hockey, you think of Florida,
Boy,
right?
I mean, we're talking about the lacrosse, soccer, hockey, so far from the big three. I remember being a kid, it was baseball, basketball, and football, and that was it. And then things would happen, right? I remember 94, the Rangers went on their incredible run, and then they had that great Eastern Conference final against the New Jersey Devils. I believe that went 7, and then, of course, Vancouver after that. And the whole neighborhood had hockey fever, and all of a sudden we were playing hockey, and it was fun, on rollerblades, on the street, get checked into the fence. I remember getting checked one time, and I landed on one of the parking petitions, get all messed up. We used to beat each other up, whatever sport we played. And so we played that for a couple summers. That was fun, but it eventually goes, while the other sports are always there. Then I remember one World Cup cycle, everybody was so into soccer. And then we were playing soccer on the hot concrete right outside, in the schoolyard. It's not like we were playing legit soccer, but we were playing it and we were having fun. So, while back then it seemed like maybe this is just a phase, a fad. Nowadays, it seems like something that's a constant, that parents maybe prefer their kids to play a game like soccer, where when I was a kid, it wasn't something you really thought about too much. So it's just interesting to see that dynamic now. However, I would say just look, and you mentioned the Panthers, and congratulations on the Stanley Cup win and second year in a row, back to back. You don't see that happen in sports too often anymore as well. But even hockey's the type of sport where, at least as kids growing up in the Bronx, they were not sports that we thought about a lot. But every once in a while, the neighborhood would catch the fever and everybody was playing it. But for some of these kids, this is their life. Soccer's their life. Lacrosse is their life. It's pretty interesting.
I was not a hockey fan when I lived in New York either. I moved here in 1992. And in 1994, my best friend Robbie, who moved here the year before from Manhattan, he was a huge Rangers fan. And so if you can picture in your mind's eye, Susan,
yeah,
I was my friend lived in an apartment above what is now Lily's Cupcakes in St. Augustine, so uptown St. Augustine. And we're on the balcony, and we've got like this little 14-inch TV, the little box TV that people used to have in their kitchen.
Oh, yeah.
And he put it on a table outside, and we're playing some kind of board game, and we're watching the Rangers. And with 8 seconds left, New Jersey, Game 7 of the Eastern Conference Final, ties the game. I thought Robbie was going to pick up the TV and throw it into San Marco Avenue.
Is that the Messier guarantee game, or was that Game 6? That was Game 7, right?
That was No, I think it was Game 6. I think it was Game 6.
Game 6, he guaranteed.
Yeah, and Messier's still a hero in New York.
Oh yeah. Well, you look at it. I think it was It was 54 years since the last time the Rangers has won the Stanley Cup, and then they finally won it in '94. And at this point, it looks like they might equal that number again.
Don't get me started. I how Chris Drury kept his job, I don't know. But, they aren't saying they're blowing up the team, but they traded Kreider. They traded Trouba last year. They're shopping around Zibanejad. I think that you're right. The Rangers are getting ready to rebuild. And is there a plan in place? Who knows? Because we know when you have James Dolan owning your team, you never really know if there's a plan. And, Rich, I think there's a topic that's been on your mind for the last couple of days. Speaking of James Dolan not having a plan,
I want to talk. I want to bring this up though too. Get your reaction to this. I saw this meme talking about Miami sports. I mean, you look at Miami sports over the years. You're talking championships. You talk about what the Panthers are doing there in South Florida, and the Marlins have won a few championships. The Heat have won some championships. But there's one team, and as Jet fans, we can at least feel somewhat happy about this. The only team that in Miami that doesn't seem to join the party is the Miami Dolphins. All the other Miami teams win champion. It's crazy. Like, look at it. Miami teams consistently. Even the Marlins have won championships, but the Dolphins just can't get it done, man. They just can't get it done.
The thing I saw is that I think there's something like 16 championship appearances by Miami sports teams since the last time Miami was won the Super Bowl. And I think 13 since the last time the Dolphins won a playoff game.
That's it. Yeah, the Dolphins don't even go to the playoffs. It's amazing. They're so horrible, and they've been, look at what they've followed up with at the quarterback position since Dan Marino. They couldn't even win a chip with Dan Marino on the team. And now they're trying to win with Jay Fiedler, right? That was his name. And, Ryan Tannehill and
Cleo Lemon.
Dolphins just, anytime you're a Jet fan and you think you're the worst franchise in sports, take a look over at the Miami Dolphins and feel a little better about yourselves. Because I would challenge anybody, the Jets, I guess maybe take out the last 10 years. But Dolphins haven't been much better. But at least the Jets went to a couple of AFC championship games a decade ago, and the years from 98 to 2012 were pretty good for the Jets. You show me the Dolphins with that stretch. It hasn't happened. So I just thought
they had 1 year with a Jets quarterback.
Yeah, that's right, with Pennington. You look at that and think, if you're a Jet fan, yes, it's awful, but take a look at Miami. And in a way, Miami has all that success happening around them. In New York, if you're the Jets, there's no success happening around you, so you're okay. Nobody wins in New York anymore. None of these teams win, so it's okay. But I thought that was interesting. And you throw it's not Miami, but throw the Tampa Bay Lightning in, where they've had a ton of success and Stanley Cup Finals victories and great seasons. So a lot of success in hockey for Florida. And hey, a couple world champions. It's been a while, but a couple world championships for the Marlins. There's been some success for these professional sports teams in South Florida. Not so much north, I guess. We only have the Jaguars right up here. Who else would
For
we have?
now.
For now,
I say that facetiously, but it is worth noting while we're on the subject that there is an ownership group, including Ken Babby, who's the owner of the Jacksonville Jumbo Shrimp, the AAA affiliate for the Marlins, who are negotiating to purchase the Tampa Bay Rays. Now, the odds of them going to Jacksonville are slim and none, but it is interesting to think about because I know Orlando would like a major league team. They don't have a ballpark. Technically, right now, the Rays don't have a ballpark, and they don't have a ballpark here in Jacksonville. So, I'll allow myself, being just 45 minutes from Jacksonville where I live, to dream a little bit. But at the same time, it'll be very interesting to see what the direction of the new ownership, if the ownership actually takes the team, is with the Rays.
That's interesting because that's another team. They haven't won a championship, but, the shortened year they did lost to the Dodgers in the COVID year. And the Rays have been a crown jewel of sports the way they've operated. The way it's shocking. You look at that team this year, they're 2.5 games out in the American League East. How do they do it? How do the Rays consistently on a minuscule payroll, you never know who is on the roster, yet every time you look up, they're near the top of the division every single year. So you got to give the Rays credit for, how many teams throughout baseball over the years, you look in your own division where it's the Toronto Blue Jays or the Baltimore Orioles, who had one good year last year. The Blue Jays, far and few between the good seasons that they've had. These teams that have existed for so long, the Seattle Mariners, the Angels, all these teams cannot string together. They cannot string together back-to-back good seasons. But here are the Tampa Bay Rays with no payroll. It seems like they're good every year. How is it possible? It's amazing to me. So I guess the point is we have some pretty good organizations here in Florida.
We certainly do. And the Rays, they had their first decade, you could lock them down for 100 losses. And about the last 17, 18 years, that's the thing I will give credit to the Rays, is not only that they do it, they've sustained it. This isn't they've had a couple of down years, but the Rays, you expect them to be in the hunt every year for about the last 15, 18 years. So very impressive. Just up the road in Orlando, did you see that Desmond Bain trade? Do you have thoughts on that? Because I thought that was – am I missing something about Desmond Bain, that he's worth 4 first-round picks and KCP and Cole Anthony?
Yeah, I don't get that at all. I mean, consistent scorer. Didn't have a chance to watch him play with the Memphis Grizzlies. Obviously they had the early exit and that really makes you wonder too with them. Does that mean Ja is next, right? Are they going to look to move on from Morant and really
Leon Rose?
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know what's going on with Memphis. I don't think it's a terrible trade. Just because he's the type of guy, hey, he's going to fill up the box score. He's going to give you 20 points a game. He can pass a little. He can rebound. He's a good shooting guard in the NBA. So is he? It's kind of reminiscent of the Knicks going out and getting with all the first round picks. Jeez, why am I freezing up?
Bridges, yeah.
Yeah, Bridges.
That was where I was going to go next. Yeah,
it's kind of where you make a big trade for a solid ball player. He's not a superstar. He's not NBA all NBA right now. The potential is there. This guy averaging 20 points a game in the league. So, and he does a lot of great things and he plays good defense. So I definitely think he can help your team, but it's not a superstar move. Get you, at least not on the surface to me looking at it, not a get you over the top type of move, but maybe a move that solidifies your roster to playing a certain way. Getting more consistent shooting. He is shooting 50% from the field. So,
and you lose solid depth. You lose solid depth with KCP and with Cole Anthony, and so I'm not crazy about that. But what you do get is somebody who is a consistent scorer. That's what the Knicks lacked a couple of years ago when Randall was hurt and Brunson had to do it on his own. I'm thinking of Jameer Nelson, the former Magic player. But, Paolo Banchero, he doesn't have that second scorer. Some nights it is Wagner, some nights it's Isaac, but for the most part, he doesn't have that second scorer. So
it's not consistent. It's not consistent.
No, you're right. At least now, and you felt like, and that was one of the things that was disappointing about Bridges, that he didn't become that guy that he was brought in to be this year in New York.
You're just pulling up his numbers now. I mean, he's 39% from three. That's one of Orlando's biggest problems. They can't hit threes. in a league of 3-point shooting, they can't hit threes. So you want that consistent scoring. You need kind of that Robin to Banchero. Unless maybe Orlando wants to trade Banchero to the Knicks for Karl-Anthony Towns.
I wouldn't hate that. I wouldn't hate that.
We might listen, but I think it's a move that says the way we were before. That's not winning a championship. So instead of running it back again, let's try something different. And I think it's a good swing. We don't know if it's a swing and miss yet or anything like that, but I don't think it's a bad move. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out on the court. Speaking about how things played out on the court and the NBA and getting into that now a little bit. As a matter of fact, before we get into that, let's get into this.
For recommending us to your family and friends. When you need a 30, 60, or 90-minute massage, it's real easy to book your appointment online. MassageByNatalie.org. MassageByNatalie.org.
Rich and Mike Sports Show on a Saturday. I ambushed you with that one, right, Mike? Here comes a commercial.
That's great radio work. That's why you're the pro.
You weren't expecting that one, were you? But yeah, talking about the NBA, and man, what an NBA Finals we're getting right now with the Pacers and the Oklahoma City Thunder. These were the two best teams down the stretch in the league, and they have not disappointed in this finals, going 7 games, the 27th game in NBA final history, which is pretty amazing if you think about it. And I think the number is 6 teams have won that game on the road. So obviously a lot going against Indiana going into Game 7 historically, but still you play to see what happens, and I give Indiana a great shot in Game 7 here. Before the series, you had OKC in 6. I had Indiana in 6. Mainly, the reason I go there is because I just think it's hard to win that Game 7 on the road, given the number you just saw there. Before this, there were 19 Game 7s. 6 road teams have won that game. So great series so far. It was amazing how Halliburton had no field goals in Game 5, right? It was one of the most pathetic performances you'll ever see in an NBA playoff game, especially from a player that you consider to be a superstar, a special player, and a player that's done the things that he's done throughout this postseason run, having a big game-winning shot and a buzzer-beating shot basically in every round of the playoffs. But great series so far. Oklahoma City, it's the same thing all the time. If you allow them to get going early, put points on the board, bury you, go up 20, 30. That's how OKC wins. They play really great from ahead. But if you can keep that game close, it starts to get a little iffy toward the end. You're not really sure how you're going to close the game. I really don't look at SGA as a closer, although you give him a lot of credit in Game 5 because he was fantastic in the second half of that game. But I think that was the game Jalen Williams also scored 37 points. So, and I would say it's up in the air right now if OKC wins the series, who the MVP of that series is. I guess it depends on who has the big game in Game 7. It could go either way. We saw that happen a couple years ago where Tatum's kind of viewed as the man, and it ended up being Brown who got the MVP in the finals. So really love the finals. But the reason we're here, Mike, is because the Knicks lost to the Pacers for the second straight year, and they end up firing Tom Thibodeau, a guy who obviously has taken the Knicks further into the playoffs than they've been in 25 years, going back to they went to the finals in 2000. But I think the firing was justifiable because of the how you saw this all unfold. Plus the other thing, Mike, I was looking at, you look over the years here with the Knicks going to the playoffs, they always lose to underdogs. They're always the favorite. They lose when they have home court advantage. They did it against Miami a few years ago, to Atlanta, a couple of times now to the Pacers, where you were the favorite and you have home court and you lose the series. That's 4 series right there where you lost to the underdog. And I don't care who the coach is. You can't survive that. You can't lose every single time you have home court. Maybe last year they had a built-in excuse with the injuries, with Randall getting injured and the whole thing. But, you know, hey, losing to Miami, that was unacceptable. Losing to, even though Miami, you know, they went on that run. They went to the finals at, what were they, the 7th seed, I think. You know, and the you had to beat the Pacers one of these years. You were the favorites. So the head coach, and not to mention the fact that all of a sudden he discovered his bench in the last 2 games of the Eastern Conference Finals, when you could have been building the team to work with the bench and building that chemistry. He just doesn't know how to use a bench. He reminds me a lot of Buck Showalter, to where he can set your franchise up. He can change the culture from a, you know, Buck Showalter inherited the Stump Merrill Yankees, I think. That was
Yes, he did.
And he was able to flip that culture, just didn't get them over the top. And then Torrey came in and got the team over the top. Thibodeau seems like that type of guy. You know, he's going to change the culture. He's going to get you going in the right direction, but he has fatal flaws in his philosophy. And in today's NBA game, and people talk about it all the time, you know, the 90s game was so much more physical. But if you look at the 90s game, it was a lot slower, right? The game today, you have to be a much better athlete to play the game today. It's up and down and up and down and up and down. And you're trying to play 7 guys in today's NBA? That's not going to work. So it's a smart move for the Knicks to move on. I don't have an issue with that. But, Mike, it seems like there's no plan here. You know, I don't think they should be in a rush. But when you're telling me your options are to ask other teams about their coach, I don't get it. I don't understand what they're trying to do right now.
It definitely doesn't make any sense. And I want to point out, thank you for 2 of my worst childhood sports memories being brought up. One, Game 7 tomorrow, June 22nd, 31 years to the day when the Knicks lost Game 7. And then that entire Stump Merrill season, probably the worst sports summer of my life, where I was like 10 years old, 9 years old, and I would literally sit there and cry watching games. But you know what? Typical James Dolan, no plan. And there have been a lot of people saying, whose call was this firing? Based on the way it's going, I think it had to be James Dolan. I don't think that Leon Rose would have put together such a haphazard post-coach plan. So I have to blame Dolan here, and it's been embarrassing. You'd think that a team like Houston, who's finally seeing success, has a guy in Udoka who's had a lot of success. You think they're going to give up that coach? For what? You don't have 5 first-round draft picks to trade him anymore.
Yep. Oh, my goodness. I should have started talking about Knicks earlier, because there are so many issues with the roster. And I think it's, to me anyway, I was on the Karl Anthony Towns thing from the very beginning. I don't think it was a smart move.
For sure.
I think they destroyed the roster with what they did. You are not going to win an NBA championship when you got 2 holes on defense. Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns are terrible defenders. You can get away with one of those guys on the floor, but not 2. And you just saw it. They could not compete against Indiana when those 2 guys were on the floor. Jalen Brunson's a great player. Somehow his plus minus was negative in the series, because it's going to be negative when you're playing on the floor with Karl Anthony Towns and you can't defend anybody, and then you're forced to switch on every single possession, switch everything. How is that any way to play defense? So they're going to have to figure out this roster. I think it's incredibly flawed. And they're going to have to clean that up with that. But I think this team would have been stronger going into the season with Randall and DiVincenzo. Can you imagine a bench with DiVincenzo coming off of it, with Deuce McBride coming off that bench? Now you're looking a little more solid, and potentially Josh Hart coming off the bench too. Not that Thibodeau would use them if they were bench players, right? But anyway, the Knicks are a mess right now. If anybody could figure out how to just ruin what was a great season, it's the New York Knicks, Mike. The last word. Who wins on Sunday, Mike?
OKC.
I'm going to go Indiana. No. Last word on the Knicks. You got 5 seconds.
Have
a great weekend, Flagler County. That's the Rich and Mike Sports Show.